The grand atrium of the High Synod of Xylanthia was not merely a room. It was a testament to 10,000 cycles of unbroken conquest, a cavernous hollow carved from the heart of a dead moon, lined with the obsidian bones of subdued civilizations. The air was perpetually chilled, recycled through filtration systems that tasted of ozone and ancient dust, designed to keep the reptilian minds of the High Council sharp and devoid of the lethargy that came with warmth. Here, in the dim bioluminescent glow of the moss towers that stretched toward the vaulted ceiling, the fate of sectors was decided in hushed tones that carried the weight of orbital bombardment. High Counselor Valen shifted his weight on the dais, his scales dull with age, his eyes clouded with the cataracts of wisdom that only centuries of political maneuvering could bestow. He looked out over the assembly, a sea of shifting shadows and flickering holographic displays, and felt a tremor of unease that he had not experienced since the uprising of the Kalan Drift. The silence in the chamber was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed against the auditory receptors of every delegate present. In the center of the room, projected within the gravity well of the tactical display, floated a rendering of Sector 88 Zeta. It was a region of space that appeared on no standard navigational charts, a void in the stellar cartography of the hegemony that had been dismissed for millennia as a navigational hazard, a graveyard of rogue comets and unstable gravity shears. But now, the projection showed something else. It showed a signal, not the chaotic static of a dying star, nor the rhythmic pulse of a pulsar, but a pattern. A structured mathematical sequence that repeated with terrifying precision, piercing the veil of background radiation like a needle through silk. "Explain this again, Sub-Admiral?" Valen's voice was a dry rasp, amplified by the acoustics of the chamber so that it seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. "And do so without the hysterical speculation that has colored your initial reports." Sub-Admiral Crox, a younger, more vibrant specimen of the Xylanthian race, stood rigid at the base of the dais, his dorsal spines flared in a display of nervous aggression that he struggled to suppress. "High Counselor, the data has been triple-checked by the sensory arrays of the Vanguard of Dawn. We detected the anomaly 3 cycles ago while pursuing a band of smugglers into the periphery of the Zeta sector. We assumed, initially, that it was a sensory ghost. But as we drew closer, the interference patterns resolved. It is a star system, Counselor. A G-type main sequence star, shielded by a membrane of exotic matter that scatters light and sensors alike. It was designed to remain hidden, perfect stealth on a stellar scale." A murmur rippled through the council, a sound like dry leaves skittering over stone. Stealth technology of that magnitude was theoretically impossible. To cloak a ship was one thing. To cloak an entire solar system required energy output equivalent to the consumption of a galaxy. "And inside?" Valen asked, his talons gripping the edge of his podium. "What lies inside the membrane?" "A single inhabited world," Crox replied, gesturing to the hologram which zoomed in to reveal a blue-green marble suspended in the void. "And orbital infrastructure. Massive. The scale is difficult to quantify. We detected alloy compositions that do not match any known periodic table variants, and biological signatures. They match the archival DNA fragments of the species known as humanity." The word hung in the air, heavy and incongruous. Humanity. The myths of the hegemony spoke of them as a fleeting curiosity, a species of short-lived, volatile bipeds that had emerged on a death world in the Orion Arm, flared briefly with nuclear ambition, and then vanished during the great silence of the previous era. They were presumed extinct, a cautionary tale of a species that had consumed itself before it could ascend. To find them here, deep in the forbidden zones, shielded by godlike technology, was a shattering of the historical narrative that the High Council found deeply offensive. "Impossible," hissed Counselor Thraka from the militarist faction, her scarred visage twisted in scorn. "Humans were scavengers, primitives who burned their own atmosphere. If a colony survived, they would be degenerates clinging to rocks. You speak of stellar shielding, you speak of megastructures." "I speak of what the sensors see, Counselor," Crox snapped, losing his composure for a fraction of a second. "We are not looking at a remnant, we are looking at a fortress, and they are hailing us." The chamber went deadly still. Valen leaned forward. "Play it." The audio filtered through the chamber speakers. There was no static, no distortion. The voice was clear, calm, and resonant, speaking in a dialect of high galactic that had not been spoken for 5,000 cycles, a formal diplomatic tongue used by the progenitors. This is the boundary of the silent void. You have crossed the threshold of the isolation zone. Your engines are stressing the local manifold. Please reduce velocity to 0.04 light speed and hold station. We will send an envoy to guide you. Do not attempt to energize weapon systems. The local physics are fragile. Fragile? Thraka laughed, a harsh, barking sound. They threaten us with fragility. They are hiding Valen. They are terrified. They have built a wall to keep the universe out, and now that we have knocked, they tremble. I say we do not wait for an envoy. I say we take the fleet and secure this technology for the hegemony. If they possess stellar shielding, we must possess it. Valen closed his eyes for a moment. He felt the weight of the decision pressing on his chest. The arrogance of Thraka was the arrogance of the hegemony itself, the belief that the unknown was merely a resource waiting to be catalogued and exploited. But the voice had not sounded afraid. It had sounded like a parent admonishing a child who had wandered too close to a fire. It sounded tired. It sounded ancient. Prepare the first expeditionary fleet, Valen commanded, opening his eyes to reveal the cold calculation within. But we go with shields down. We go as explorers, not conquerors. If they are indeed the humans of legend, they are unpredictable. But if they have built a cage around their star, we must know what they are keeping inside. The journey through the membrane was a psychological ordeal that tested the discipline of the finest Zalanthian crews. As the armada of heavy cruisers passed through the distortion field, the sensors went blind. The viewport screens showed not the streak of stars, but a swirling, kaleidoscopic tunnel of impossible colors, violets that tasted like copper, greens that hummed with a low-frequency vibration. The crew reported hallucinations, whispers of long-dead ancestors, visions of landscapes that defied geometry. It was as if they were sailing not through space, but through the subconscious mind of a sleeping god. When the fleet emerged into real space on the other side, the silence was deafening. High Counselor Valen stood on the bridge of the flagship Sovereign's Will, staring out at the system that had been hidden from the galaxy. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying. The star was there, a stable yellow sun, but it was ringed by a construct of such delicate intricacy that it looked like lace spun from diamond. A lattice of silver and light surrounded the star, capturing its energy with perfect efficiency. But it was not a Dyson sphere. It was incomplete, open at the poles, allowing great beams of focused energy to shoot out into the dark, aiming at nothing. And then there was the planet. It was a garden world, lush and vibrant, but orbiting it were stations of alabaster and chrome, silent sentinels that rotated with a grace that made the hegemony's brutalist warships look like crude blocks of iron. There were no fleets of defense, no minefields, no fighter squadrons buzzing in warning, just the silent, majestic rotation of the stations. They are not responding to standard hails, the communications officer whispered, her voice trembling. Wait, I am detecting a single vessel approaching, small craft, unarmed. On the main view screen, a speck of white detached itself from the nearest station. It grew rapidly, moving without the flare of thrusters, sliding through the vacuum as if it were falling. It was a sleek, teardrop-shaped vessel, smooth and devoid of windows or seams. It stopped 5,000 kilometers off the bow of the Sovereign's Will. Incoming transmission, the officer said. Visual. The screen flickered and stabilized. The image that appeared was that of a human. He was seated in a simple chair, surrounded by what looked like a library of physical books, paper and leather, archaic and strange. He wore robes of a deep midnight blue, unadorned by medals or rank insignia. His face was lined, his hair silver, his eyes dark, and filled with a profound, crushing sorrow that seemed to reach through the screen and grip Valen's soul. I am Solon, the human said. He did not bow, he did not salute. I am the architect of the watch. You have come far, children of Zalanthiya. We had hoped to remain undisturbed for another eon, but entropy is a patient hunter, and curiosity is its hound. Valen stepped into the transmission field, straightening his ceremonial sash. I am High Counselor Valen of the Ethelgard hegemony. We discovered your signature. We come seeking knowledge. We did not know humanity survived. Solon smiled, a sad, weary expression. Survived? No, Counselor, we did not merely survive, we left. We saw the fires burning in the cradle of the galaxy, the wars of resources, the endless cycles of rise and fall. We realized that the game was rigged, so we took our pieces off the board. You hide here, Thraka interrupted, stepping into the sensor pickup range, her voice dripping with disdain. You hide in a hole while the galaxy burns. You hoard technology that could end suffering, that could bring order. Solon looked at Thraka, and for a moment the human's eyes seemed to glow with a faint internal light. "We do not hide, warrior, and we do not hoard. We are not keeping the galaxy out. We are keeping it safe." "Safe from what?" Valen asked, sensing a shift in the atmosphere, a deepening of the tension. "From the truth," Solon said softly. "Come, bring your shuttle, just the leaders, leave your weapons. If you bring weapons, the station's automated systems will atomize your fleet before you can cycle your airlocks. This is not a threat. It is a safety protocol. We deal with forces here that react poorly to aggression." The shuttle ride to the station, which Solon had identified as the spire of the anchor, was conducted in silence. Valen, Thraka, and a small entourage of scientists and guards sat strapped in their harnesses, watching the human structure grow in the viewport. Up close, the station was even more impressive. It wasn't built, it was grown. The materials flowed into one another, organic and seamless. There were no rivets, no weld lines. It was a sculpture the size of a moon. When they docked, the airlock cycled with a musical chime, not the harsh hiss of decompression. The ramp lowered, revealing a grand hall filled with light. It was not the harsh lead glare of a warship, but a soft, diffuse sunlight that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The floor was polished stone, cool and smooth. Solon was waiting for them. He stood alone, no guards, no weapons. He gestured for them to follow. "You expected a fortress," Solon said as he led them down a long corridor lined with statues, not of conquerors, but of thinkers, poets, and scientists. "You expected guns and shields. That is the way of the galaxy. The young races always look for the sword first." "We are not young," Thraka grunted, her hand hovering near her sidearm, though she had been forced to leave the power pack on the shuttle. "The hegemony has ruled for 10,000 cycles." 10,000, Solon mused. "A blink, a breath. The concrete beneath your feet was cured 50,000 years ago. The library we are walking toward holds data from civilizations that were dust before your sun ignited." They entered a vast rotunda. In the center was a holographic projection, but it was unlike anything the Xylanthian technology could produce. It was a real-time map of the universe, but it showed not just stars, but the fabric of spacetime itself, a shimmering, undulating web of gravity and dark matter. But there was a tear in it. Valen stopped, his breath catching in his throat. On the map near the center of the projection was a jagged black scar. It pulsated, eating at the edges of the web, unraveling the strands of reality. "What is that?" Valen whispered. "That," Solon said, turning to face them, "is the wound, the great filter. Every civilization eventually reaches a point where their technology outpaces their wisdom. They crack the atom, they split the gene, and eventually they try to pierce the veil of dimension. They try to tap into the zero-point energy of the vacuum itself, and they succeed. And in doing so, they break the skin of the universe." Solon walked toward the projection, his hand passing through the light. "We did it. Humanity, on old Earth. We thought we had found the ultimate power source. We didn't realize that the vacuum isn't empty. It is a barrier. A dam holding back a sea of chaotic, high-entropy energy from a dying reality that sits above ours. We cracked the dam." The aliens stood frozen. The arrogance of the hegemony, the pride of their fleets, the certainty of their dominance, it all evaporated in the face of the concept Solon was describing. "We couldn't fix it," Solon continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The tear began to widen. It would have consumed the solar system, then the sector, then the galaxy. It is a chain reaction. Vacuum decay. It moves at the speed of light. You wouldn't even see it coming. You would just cease to exist." "So you ran," Thraka sneered, though her voice lacked its usual fire. "No," Solon said, his eyes hardening. "We didn't run, we caught it. We built the colony ships, yes. But we didn't fly away to find a new home. We flew here to the optimal geometric point to build a counterforce. This system, this star, it's not a colony, it's a clamp." Solon gestured to the walls. "The energy we harvest from the star, the exotic matter shields, the silence, it is all focused into a single beam, fired continuously into a dimensional rift located 3 light years from here. We are stitching the wound shut second by second, day by day. We have been doing this for 20,000 years. If we stop, if we falter, if our focus wavers for even an hour, the tear opens, and the universe dies." Valen looked at the human with a new emotion. It wasn't fear, it was awe. It was a vertigo of the soul. He realized then why the humans looked so tired. They weren't just living here. They were holding the weight of existence on their shoulders. They were the atlases of the galaxy, standing in the dark, unthanked, unknown, holding up the sky so that races like the Xylanthians could play their petty games of war and conquest. You protect us, Valen said, his voice trembling. All this time we call you myths, we call you extinct, and you are here in the dark saving us. We do what must be done, Solon said simply, but we are failing. The admission hung in the air like a thunderclap. Failing, Thraka stepped forward. You have this technology, you have this power. The machine is old, Solon said, walking over to a console and touching it gently. And we are few. The genetic diversity of our colony is reaching critical lows. Our equipment requires maintenance that we can no longer perform. The stress on the local manifold is increasing. The tier is pushing back. We called you High Counselor not because we wanted to be found, but because we need relief. We cannot hold the line alone anymore. Valen looked at the projection of the tier. It seemed to pulse faster, an angry red vein in the blue light of the map. He thought of the hegemony, the endless bureaucracy, the wars over minerals and borders. It all seemed so incredibly small. What do you need? Valen asked. Resources, Solon said. Raw materials to rebuild the lattice. Palladium, iridium, zero-point condensates, and engineers. We need mines. We need to teach you how to man the wall. We need you to take up the watch. Thraka laughed, a bitter, incredulous sound. You ask the hegemony to become janitors, to sit in the dark and hold a door shut. We are conquerors, we expand, we do not serve. Solon turned to her, and for the first time there was anger in his face. It was a cold, terrifying anger. Then you will die, he said calmly. And your conquests will be dust, and your history will be forgotten because there will be no one left to remember it. There is no expansion if the canvas you paint on burns away. You have a choice, Ethelgard. You can be the rulers of a graveyard or the guardians of a future. The silence stretched. Valen looked at his hands. He looked at Crox, who stood pale and shaking. He looked at Solon, the frail human who held a god's burden. We will help, Valen said. Counselor, Thraka shouted. You cannot commit the fleet to. I am the High Counselor, Valen roared, his voice echoing through the rotunda, startling even the human. And I say we will help. Send the signal to the fleet. Drop the combat shields. Open the cargo bays. We are not conquerors today. We are laborers. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity that stunned the galaxy. The Ethelgard hegemony, known for its xenophobia and aggression, turned its entire war fleet into a logistics train. Cruisers stripped their armor to ferry raw materials. Destroyers used their targeting computers to calculate stress vectors in the lattice. The humans and the aliens worked side by side. It was a clash of cultures that should have been impossible. The Ethelgard were loud, aggressive, and hierarchical. The humans were quiet, egalitarian, and philosophical. But the task united them. The sheer scale of the engineering problem forced a mutual respect. The Ethelgard engineers marveled at the human technology, elegant, minimalist, intuitive. The humans marveled at the Ethelgard endurance, their ability to work for days without sleep, their immense physical strength. Valen spent much of his time with Solon in the control center of the Spire. They watched the telemetry from the rift. It was stabilizing. The infusion of new materials, the fresh energy from the Ethelgard reactors, it was working. The red pulse of the tier was slowing down. You have saved us, Solon said one evening, looking out at the stars. We were close to the breaking point, closer than I admitted. We saved ourselves, Valen replied, sipping a cup of the bitter herbal tea the humans favored. It is strange, Solon. I have spent 400 years seeking glory for my name. I thought glory was a statue in the capital, but this silence, this work, it feels heavier, more real. That is the burden of the Keeper, Solon said. It is the only glory that matters, the glory that no one sees. Tell me, Valen asked, looking at the human. If we fix this, if we seal the rift, what then? Do you return to the galaxy? Do you rejoin the Council of Races? Solon hesitated. He looked down at the console. We have been analyzing the data from the rift, Valen. For 20,000 years we have stared into the abyss, and recently the abyss started staring back. Valen froze. What do you mean? The signal, Solon said. The one that brought you here, it wasn't just a beacon, it was a carrier wave. We were broadcasting, yes, but we were also receiving. Solon tapped a few keys. The holographic map changed. The tier was still there, but now overlaid on it was a waveform, complex, structured, linguistic. It is not a tear into chaos, Solon whispered. Not anymore. The energy on the other side, it has organized, it has stabilized. Valen, we thought we were holding back a flood, but I think we've been blocking a door. A door to where? To a place where the entropy problem has been solved, Solon said, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and terror. A universe that isn't dying, a universe that is just beginning. The signal, it's a greeting, it's an invitation. Valen stared at the waveform. The implications were staggering. They are calling us. They are waiting for us, Solon corrected. They are waiting for us to stop being afraid of the dark, to stop building walls. You asked if we would rejoin the galaxy. I don't think we can. We have outgrown it. The colony we are preparing to leave, not to another star, but through the rift. You would go into the unknown? Valen asked. Into that fire. It is not fire, Solon said. It is dawn, and we are not going alone. That is why we needed you, not just to fix the machine, but to inherit it. Solon turned to Valen, placing a hand on the alien's shoulder. The touch was warm, alien, yet familiar. We are leaving, Valen. Humanity is moving on. We are taking the leap. But someone must stay behind. Someone must watch the door. Someone must decide when the rest of the galaxy is ready to follow. Valen realized then the true nature of the twist. The humans hadn't called them for help. They had called them for a coronation. They were passing the torch. You want us to be the keepers, Valen stammered. The Ethelgard, we are warmongers, we are tyrants. You were, Solon said firmly. But look at your fleet, look at your people. They are building, not destroying. They are working for a cause greater than themselves. You have changed, Valen. The moment you chose to help us instead of conquer us, you evolved. You are ready. The realization settled over Valen like a heavy cloak. The hegemony would change. It would have to. The knowledge of what lay here, the responsibility of the rift, would reshape their entire society. They would no longer be the scourge of the galaxy. They would be its silent guardians, its gatekeepers. When, Valen asked, his voice steady. Soon, Solon said. The alignment is approaching. The rift will stabilize for a transition window. We will take our station, our city, and pass through. The lattice will remain. The controls will be yours. The day of the departure was not marked by fanfare or speeches. It was a day of quiet, seismic shifts in the heart of the galaxy. The human station, the spire of the anchor, detached itself from the lattice. Its engines, humming with a frequency that vibrated in the teeth of every being in the system, flared to life. The Ethelgard fleet formed an honor guard, 2 lines of warships stretching for 1,000,000 kilometers, their running lights pulsing in a salute. On the bridge of the Sovereign's will, Valen watched. The human cityship moved toward the tier in reality. The rift, usually a jagged scar, smoothed out into a perfect circle of blinding white light. It was terrifyingly bright, a hole in the universe that led to somewhere else, somewhere new. Goodbye, Solon, Valen whispered. Watch the door, Valen, Solon's voice came over the comms one last time. And when the others are ready, when the galaxy learns peace, let them in. The human ship accelerated. It didn't just move, it vanished. It slipped into the light and was gone. The light flared once, a shockwave of pure possibility that washed over the fleet, resetting sensors and leaving a lingering taste of ozone and rain in the air. Then the rift closed, not completely. It remained as a shimmering distortion, a window waiting. Silence returned to the system, but it was not the silence of the dead. It was the silence of a cathedral. High Counselor Valen turned to his bridge crew. They were looking at him, waiting. They were no longer the soldiers of a hungry empire. They were the first acolytes of a new order. Set course for the homeworld, Valen commanded, his voice ringing with a new authority, deep and resonant. We have much to do. We must rewrite the laws. We must dismantle the war foundries. We have a new mission. High Counselor, Crox asked, what do we tell the Council? What do we tell the galaxy? Valen looked at the distortion on the screen, the gateway to the next universe, the legacy left by the humans. Tell them, Valen said, that the war is over. Tell them that we have found the horizon. Tell them that the watch has begun. And in the cold dark of the Zeta sector, under the light of a caged star, the Ethelgard fleet broke formation and began the long work of turning swords into plowshares, watched over by the ghost of a humanity that had not died, but had simply walked through the door to see what lay beyond the end of time.